In the fog-shrouded waters off the New England coast, 3 estranged heirs were about to inherit more than an island. What started as a simple legal obligation took a shocking turn when they discovered their uncle hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been murdered protecting an ancient secret. Abigail Coulter wasn't your typical historian. For nearly a decade, she had spent her life documenting forgotten civilizations and unraveling historical mysteries, known for her relentless curiosity and unwavering rationality. When she and her cousins Nathaniel and Jacob encountered sealed letters, cryptic symbols carved into their dead uncle's hands, and warnings about something called the heart, they had no idea they were walking into a deadly conspiracy 3,000 years in the making. Abigail's decision to open that sealed letter would lead to a confrontation between ancient guardians and modern greed, a battle where the stakes weren't just their lives, but the fate of knowledge itself. What began as an inheritance dispute would become a test of human worthiness. The Atlantic coast would never be the same after the island of Grave Harbor vanished beneath the waves, taking its secrets with it, and marking Abigail as the 47th guardian of a covenant that had protected humanity from itself since before recorded history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The telegram had arrived on a Tuesday, which I should have taken as an omen. Nothing good ever came on Tuesdays in my family. I pressed my gloved hand against the train window, watching the New England coast slide past in shades of gray and green. The Atlantic churned beyond rocky cliffs, restless and hungry. Somewhere, out there beyond the reach of civilization, lay Grave Harbor Isle, my inheritance, my burden, my story to tell. The conductor's voice cut through my thoughts. Ashford Station, next stop. I gathered my carpetbag and journal, the leather worn smooth from years of documenting other people's histories. This time, the history was my own. Uncle Silas had left me something in his will, along with my cousins Nathaniel and Jacob. What that something was, the telegram hadn't specified, only that my presence was required for the reading. The station platform was nearly empty when I stepped down. Sea mist clung to everything, making the gas lamps glow like faded stars. I spotted them immediately, 2 men standing apart from each other, neither acknowledging the other's presence. 5 years had passed since they'd spoken. 5 years since the argument that split them like driftwood against rocks. Nathaniel saw me first. His naval bearing hadn't changed, all rigid spine and measured steps. Grey had crept into his dark hair at the temples, making him look older than his 38 years. "Abby." He took my bag without asking. "You look well. You look tired," I said, because honesty had always been my policy with Nathaniel. "How are Eleanor and the children?" "Well enough." His jaw tightened. "She didn't want me to come." I understood without him saying more. Eleanor had never forgiven Uncle Silas for the expedition that cost Nathaniel his naval commission. Some wounds ran too deep for time to heal. Jacob approached more slowly, hands buried in the pockets of a coat that had seen better days. Where Nathaniel had grown harder with age, Jacob had grown softer. His eyes held a dreamer's distance, as if he were always looking at something just beyond the visible world. "Hello, Abby." His smile carried genuine warmth. "You came?" "Of course I came." I glanced between them. "Have you two spoken?" The silence was answer enough. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and older secrets. Mr. Pemberton was a thin man, with wire-rimmed spectacles that caught the lamplight as he shuffled documents across his desk. Outside, fog pressed against the windows like something trying to get in. "The matter is quite straightforward," Pemberton said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Silas Coulter's estate consists primarily of one property, Grave Harbor Isle, located approximately 12 miles off the coast. The cursed island, The words escaped before I could stop them. Pemberton's expression didn't change. The island has a certain reputation, yes. No one has successfully settled there in over 40 years. Several mining operations failed. Ships run aground on its rocks with disturbing regularity. He paused. Your uncle spent the last decade of his life there alone. Nathaniel leaned forward. What's the land worth? Monetarily? Pemberton removed his spectacles to clean them, a gesture that felt like avoidance. Very little, I'm afraid. The island produces nothing. Its location makes it unsuitable for shipping lanes. Most consider it a navigational hazard. Then why did Silas want it? Jacob's voice carried an edge of fascination that made me uneasy. Pemberton set down his spectacles and pulled a sealed envelope from his drawer. My name was written across it in Uncle Silas's distinctive hand, all sharp angles and hurried strokes. He left specific instructions, Pemberton said. Miss Coulter is to receive this letter, to be opened only when, and I quote, the fog feels alive. He looked at me with something like pity. He also stipulated that all three of you must visit the island before any decisions regarding its sale or disposition can be made. That's absurd, Nathaniel said. I have responsibilities, a family. Nevertheless, those are the terms. Pemberton slid papers toward each of us. You have inherited Grave Harbor Isle jointly, but you cannot claim it, sell it, or abandon it until you have spent at least one night there. Together. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the mantel clock. I studied the envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of more than paper and ink. Uncle Silas had always been eccentric, but this felt different, deliberate, almost desperate. When did he die? I asked quietly. Pemberton hesitated. That's the peculiar thing, Miss Coulter. We don't precisely know. His body was found 3 months ago by fishermen, washed up on the mainland shore. The coroner estimated he'd been dead approximately 2 weeks. But the condition of the remains made precise determination impossible. 2 weeks in the water would explain that, Nathaniel said. Except he wasn't in the water the entire time. Pemberton's voice dropped. He was found with his pockets full of stones, deliberately weighted down, and there were markings carved into his hands, symbols no one could identify. The fog outside seemed to press harder against the windows. I heard Jacob's breath catch, saw Nathaniel's knuckles whiten as he gripped the chair arms. Suicide? I forced the word out. The authorities ruled it misadventure. But the fishermen who found him said... Pemberton stopped, then continued reluctantly. They said his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, and in his coat pocket was a note. Just 3 words, they are waking, and nobody spoke. The clock's ticking grew louder, or perhaps it was my heartbeat filling my ears. I thought of the letter in my hands, the condition Uncle Silas had attached to it. The fog feels alive. The rational part of my mind rejected the notion as melodramatic nonsense. But another part, the part that had spent childhood summers listening to Silas's stories of ancient secrets and forgotten civilizations, whispered that perhaps melodrama and truth weren't always separate things. I'll go, I said. Nathaniel turned to stare at me. Abby, this is madness. It's family, I corrected. And it's the truth. Whatever happened to Uncle Silas, whatever is really on that island, don't you want to know? Don't you owe him that much? Jacob was already nodding. She's right. We have to go. We don't have to do anything, Nathaniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. I saw the war in his eyes, the practical man wrestling with the nephew who had once adored his eccentric uncle. I placed the sealed letter on Pemberton's desk. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Arrange for a boat and supplies for 3 days. If there's nothing to find, we'll return, sign your papers, and sell the island to whoever wants it. But we do this properly. We do it together. The brothers exchanged a look that held 5 years of silence and shared history. Finally, Nathaniel nodded once, a sharp military gesture of acceptance. 3 days, he said. Then we're done with this. But as we filed out into the fog-thick street, I couldn't shake the feeling that 3 days might be exactly 3 days too long. The mist moved around us with unsettling purpose, and somewhere far out to sea, I imagined I could hear the whisper of waves against lonely rocks. Behind us, Pemberton watched from his window until we disappeared into the grey. Then he locked his door, pulled the curtains, and tried not to think about the other letter Silas Coulter had left. The one addressed to no one, found clutched in his dead hand, that contained only a crude map and 2 words written over and over until the ink ran red. Guard it, guard it, guard it. That night I sat in my rented room above the general store, unable to sleep. The sealed letter lay on the nightstand, pale in the moonlight. I picked it up a dozen times, each time stopping myself from breaking the seal. The fog feels alive. What did that even mean? Through the thin walls I heard raised voices. Nathaniel and Jacob's room was next to mine, and apparently proximity had forced the conversation they'd been avoiding for 5 years. "You can't possibly believe in curses," Nathaniel was saying. "You're a grown man, Jacob, an educated man. I believe in things we don't understand yet." Jacob's voice was quieter but firm. "Archaeology taught me that every legend has a root in truth. Every myth preserves something real. Silas was brilliant, but he was also paranoid, obsessed. He threw away his reputation chasing fantasies. Or he found something." A pause. "You read Pemberton's description of his body, the symbols, the stones in his pockets. Does that sound like a man who simply drowned? It sounds like a man who lost his mind. Then what are we afraid of?" The silence that followed that question stretched until I heard footsteps and a door closing. One of them had left. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard what might have been crying or might have been the wind. I returned to my narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind seemed laden with meaning. The fog pressed against my window, and in the darkness, I could almost believe it was trying to form shapes, faces, warnings. My mind drifted to Uncle Silas as I'd last seen him 6 years ago at my father's funeral. He'd pulled me aside after the service, gripped my hands with surprising strength for a man of 70. "You have your father's mind, Abby," he'd said. "Practical but curious. That's a rare combination. When the time comes, trust your curiosity, but never forget your practicality." "What time?" I'd asked. He'd smiled sadly. "You'll know. The island will call you, and you'll have to decide what you believe." I'd thought it grief-talking, the rambling of an old man who'd outlived most of his generation. Now lying in the darkness with tomorrow's journey looming, those words felt less like rambling and more like prophecy. Somewhere in the harbour, a bell buoy clanged its lonely warning. The fog thickened, and in my half-sleep I could have sworn I heard humming. A tune I knew but couldn't name, rising from nowhere and everywhere at once. When I finally slept, I dreamed of rocks that whispered and gold that screamed, and an island that remembered every sin committed on its shores. Dawn came late and reluctant, the sun a pale disk behind layers of grey. I stood on the dock while Nathaniel checked our hired boat, a sturdy vessel called the Mary Catherine. The harbour master had crossed himself when Nathaniel mentioned our destination. "That should have told us everything we needed to know. Weather's turning," the old man said, squinting at the horizon. "Fog's unnatural thick for April. I'd wait if I were you." "We can't wait," Jacob said. He'd been pacing since we arrived, all nervous energy and barely contained excitement. His bag bulged with notebooks and surveying equipment. "A scholar preparing for discovery, not tragedy. Your funeral," the harbour master spat into the water. "Mind the rocks off the western point. They've got teeth that'll tear a hull open before you know you've struck." Nathaniel helped me into the boat with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years at sea. His hands were steady, but I noticed the way his eyes kept returning to the horizon, as if measuring distances and odds. We pushed off just after 7. The town of Ashford receded quickly, swallowed by mist. Within minutes, we might have been the only souls in the world. The water was glass-smooth, unnaturally calm. No birds, no other boats. Just the rhythmic splash of oars and our own breathing. "Tell me about the island." I said, pulling out my journal. If I was going to document this, I needed facts. What do we actually know? Jacob answered without taking his eyes off the compass. Grave Harbor Isle was first charted in 1706, originally called St. Michael's Rock by fishermen who'd shelter there during storms. In 1803, a survey revealed significant mineral deposits, silver and copper, possibly gold. So they mined it? I asked, tried to. 3 separate operations between 1805 and 1849, each failed within a year. Why? Officially, geological instability, flooded tunnels, poor yields. Jacob finally looked at me and I saw the gleam in his eyes. Unofficially, miners reported hearing voices in the depths. Equipment would malfunction. Men would wander into the tunnels and emerge hours later with no memory of where they'd been. By 1850, nobody would work there at any wage. Nathaniel snorted. Superstitious nonsense. Mines are dangerous. Men die. It's tragic, but not supernatural. Then explain the ships, Jacob countered. 27 documented wrecks in the waters around Grave Harbor since 1750, most in clear weather. Experienced captains running aground on rocks that aren't marked on any chart. Rocks that appear and disappear with the tides. Geological instability, Nathaniel repeated. Shifting sandbars, strong currents. There are rational explanations. Uncle Silas didn't think so. The brothers locked eyes, and I interceded before the argument could escalate. What did Uncle Silas believe? Jacob pulled a folded paper from his coat. I found this among his early journals. A letter from 1879, when he first became interested in the island. He wrote, "The land remembers what men forget. Grave Harbor is not cursed. It is a guardian, and guardians do not sleep." The fog shifted around us, and suddenly the island was there. It didn't appear gradually like normal land. One moment we were surrounded by grey nothing. The next, we were staring at towering cliffs of dark stone that rose from the water like the walls of a drowned fortress. The island stretched perhaps 2 miles long and half as wide, all jagged edges and unnatural angles. Even in daylight it seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light. God, I whispered. Nathaniel's face had gone pale. His hands froze on the oars. That's not what? Jacob leaned forward. Not what the charts showed. The elevation is all wrong. Those cliffs shouldn't be there. Charts can be inaccurate, I said, though my voice sounded uncertain even to my own ears. Naval charts aren't. I've sailed these waters. Grave Harbor is supposed to be low and rocky, barely above high tide. These cliffs are 60 feet if they're an inch. We drifted closer, caught in some invisible current. The water here was darker, almost black and perfectly still. No waves broke against the shore. No sound reached us except the creak of our boat and, very faintly, something that might have been wind through stone, or might have been voices. Jacob pointed to a narrow inlet. There, that's the landing Uncle Silas marked on his maps. We rowed toward it in silence. The cliffs rose on either side like a closing jaw. I tried to shake off the sense of being watched, but the feeling only intensified as we entered the inlet. Shadows moved in ways that had nothing to do with the sun. Shapes seemed to form and dissolve in the rock face, almost like faces frozen in eternal scream. Am I imagining things? I said carefully. Or do those cliff walls look deliberately carved? Nathaniel studied them with a seaman's practiced eye. Natural erosion can create unusual patterns. Those aren't patterns. Jacob's voice was tight with excitement and something darker. Fear, perhaps, or recognition. Those are symbols, protective wards, warnings. The boat scraped against a rocky shore, the sound unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. We'd arrived. Grave Harbor Isle stretched before us, and as I stepped onto its stones, I felt the wrongness of the place settle into my bones like cold water. The island knew we were here, and it had been waiting. The shore was littered with debris, not just driftwood and seaweed, but the scattered remains of human occupation. Rusted mining equipment half buried in black sand, rotted timbers that might have been from buildings or ships, and bones. Not all of them looked like they came from fish. Don't touch anything, Nathaniel said, more to himself than us. His military training had kicked in, all alertness and caution. We survey the area, find Uncle Silas's cabin, document what we see, and leave at first light. No heroics, no unnecessary exploration. Jacob was already moving inland, drawn like a compass needle to magnetic north. I hurried after him, leaving Nathaniel to secure the boat. The ground beneath my feet felt strange, slightly spongy, despite the rock. With each step, I had the unsettling sensation of walking on something that was holding its breath. We found a path, if it could be called that. More like a suggestion of passage between clutching thorns and stunted trees that grew at impossible angles. The vegetation was wrong. Everything was grey-green and thorny, covered in a slick moisture that wasn't quite rain. When Jacob brushed against a branch, it bent away from him before springing back with enough force to draw blood across his hand. "Even the plants are hostile," he muttered, wrapping his handkerchief around the wound. "Or protecting something," I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. The cabin appeared after 20 minutes of climbing. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by those twisted trees, a solid structure of weathered wood that looked far better maintained than it should after months of abandonment. Smoke-stained windows stared at us like dead eyes. The door was shut. Nathaniel caught up to us, breathing hard. "That's it? That's where Silas lived?" I approached slowly, studying the cabin's exterior. Symbols had been carved into the doorframe and windowsills, the same protective marks we'd seen on the cliffs. More elaborate here, more desperate. "He was afraid of something," I said. The door was locked from the inside. Through the dusty window I could see a single room. Fireplace, table, narrow bed, and covering every wall, papers, maps and drawings, and what looked like equations, all pinned and layered until the original wood was invisible. "We need to get inside," Jacob said. Nathaniel tried the door, then the windows. Everything sealed shut. "We'd have to break in." "Then we break in." "Abby, your letter." "Uncle Silas's instructions." "When the fog feels alive." Jacob gestured at the clearing. The mist had followed us from shore, now swirling through the trees with deliberate purpose. It pooled around the cabin like a living thing, testing for entry points. "If this doesn't qualify, nothing will." He was right. I pulled the sealed letter from my coat pocket, broke the wax, and unfolded the heavy paper. Uncle Silas's handwriting was worse than I remembered, almost frantic. But the message was clear. "My dear Abby, if you're reading this, I have failed to keep my watch. But perhaps that is as it should be. Every guardian must eventually pass their burden to another, and I can think of no one better suited than you. The cabin key is buried beneath the third stone clockwise from the door. Inside you will find my journals and maps. Read them carefully. The island is not what it seems. It never was. What men call a curse is actually a covenant. What they fear as haunted is actually protected. 300 years ago, something precious was entrusted to this place. Something that must never fall into hands that would misuse it. I have spent a decade learning the island's secrets. The rocks that whisper are not possessed. They remember. The tunnels that shift are not unstable. They guard. And the treasure that so many have died seeking is not gold. It is knowledge, ancient, dangerous, and absolutely vital. Trust your mind, Abby, but trust your heart more. The island will test you, all of you, and when it does, remember, the greatest curse is the one we bring with us. Guard what I could not. The fog feels alive because it is, and it has been waiting for someone worthy. Your loving uncle, Silas. My hands trembled as I finished reading aloud. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind, which had picked up and was now making sounds that definitely weren't natural. Not quite words, but close. So terribly close. "He'd lost his mind," Nathaniel said, but without conviction. "Or found something we can't understand yet." Jacob was already counting stones. Third clockwise from the door. "Here." The stone lifted easily, too easily, as if placed there yesterday instead of months ago. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was an iron key. The lock turned smoothly. The door swung open on hinges that didn't creak, and we stepped into Uncle Silas's last sanctuary. The smell hit me first. Not decay or mustiness, but something else. Mineral and salt, and underneath it faintly, blood. The papers covering the walls weren't just maps. They were warnings, symbols and calculations mixed with frantic notes. Don't dig past 20 feet. The voices aren't in your head. Remember, the island protects itself. They know when you're lying. Jacob moved to the table where a journal lay open, its pages covered in the same desperate handwriting. His last entries. Listen to this. March 17th. They've found me, not on the island. Someone from the mainland. Following, watching. They want what's below. I have to stop them. Have to make sure the brothers come together. Have to... And then it just stops. The brothers, I repeated. Not his nephews. Not you two specifically. The brothers. What does that mean? Nathaniel had found something beneath the bed. A locked wooden box, small but heavy. There's no key. Break it open, Jacob said. No. I don't know why I objected so strongly, but the word came out with force. Uncle Silas locked it for a reason. We need to find the key. Do this properly. We searched as the afternoon light faded. The cabin revealed its secrets slowly. More journals documenting years of solitary research, maps of tunnel systems that ran deep beneath the island, drawings of symbols that matched those carved everywhere we looked. And everywhere, references to something called the heart. The heart must remain sealed. The heart knows all secrets. The heart is why they died. What heart? Nathaniel demanded, his patience fraying. What is he talking about? Thunder rolled across the island, though the sky had been clear moments before. Rain began to fall, heavy and sudden. We were trapped. Our boat was exposed on the shore, but venturing out in this storm would be suicide. The wind howled through the trees, and beneath it, unmistakable now, came the sound of voices. Telling. And preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Singing, humming, calling. Jacob's face had gone white. Do you hear that? Wind through the rocks, Nathaniel said automatically, but his hand had moved to his belt where a knife hung. Natural acoustic phenomena. Natural phenomena don't know your name, I said softly, because the voices did. They were calling us, all three of us. Come down, come see, come understand. The knocking started at midnight. We'd barricaded ourselves in the cabin, lit the fireplace, and were taking turns keeping watch. But when the knocking began, slow and methodical, coming from beneath the floorboards, we all froze. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more knocks, pause. Someone's in the basement, Jacob whispered. There is no basement, Nathaniel said, but he was already pulling up the rug near the fireplace. Beneath it, previously hidden, was a trap door. The knocking came again, louder, more insistent, and with it a voice muffled but clear. Let me out, please. It's so cold down here, so dark. Let me out. It was Uncle Silas's voice. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name, but Uncle Silas was dead. Months dead. Buried on the mainland in consecrated ground. It's a trick, Nathaniel said, but his hand was on the trapdoor's iron ring. Don't. I grabbed his wrist. Don't you dare open that door. What if he's alive? What if he's been trapped down there all this time? He's dead, Nathaniel. We saw the death certificate. You can't trust... The knocking stopped. Silence fell like a weight. Then, from below, something laughed. Not Uncle Silas, not human at all. We spent the rest of the night with our backs against the door, watching the trap door, waiting for it to burst open. It never did. But at dawn, when we finally worked up the courage to lift it, we found a ladder descending into darkness. And at the bottom, just visible in the thin morning light, something glinted. Gold. The island had shown us its treasure. Now we had to decide if we were foolish enough to claim it. Morning brought no comfort. The storm had passed, leaving everything slick with moisture that wasn't quite water. It had a mineral quality, slightly oily, and it made the world outside the cabin windows look distorted. Unreal, We stood around the open trapdoor, staring down into darkness that seemed to stare back. "We need rope," Nathaniel said. His voice had taken on the clipped efficiency he used when afraid but unwilling to admit it. "Lanterns. Proper equipment. We have rope in the boat." Jacob was already moving toward the door. "I'll get it." "Not alone, you won't." I grabbed my coat. Nathaniel searched the cabin again. There must be something we missed, some explanation for what we heard last night. The walk back to shore felt longer than it had yesterday. The trees seemed to have moved closer to the path, their thorny branches reaching across like clasping fingers. Jacob walked ahead, his wounded hand tucked against his chest. The cut from yesterday had turned an ugly purple around the edges. "That needs cleaning," I said. "It's fine. It's infected. Or something worse." I caught his arm, forcing him to stop. "Jacob, what are we doing here?" "Really doing? Uncle Silas is dead. Whatever he was protecting, whatever he found, maybe it's better left alone." His eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that frightened me more than the voices or the knocking. Obsession. The same look I'd seen in Uncle Silas's photographs from his final years. "You didn't read all his journals." "Abby, I did. Last night while you slept." He pulled his arm free. "This island. What's beneath it? It's not treasure in the way people think. It's history. Real history. Evidence of civilizations that shouldn't exist according to everything we know. Uncle Silas spent 10 years documenting it. We can't just walk away. We can. We should. You sound like Nathaniel." Maybe Nathaniel is right. The words hung between us. Then Jacob smiled, sad and knowing. "You don't believe that. I saw your face when you read his letter. You felt it too. The pull. The need to know. We're Coulters, Abby. We don't run from mysteries." He was right, and I hated him for it. The boat was still there, but our supplies had been disturbed. Not ransacked, exactly. More like carefully examined and returned to their places just slightly wrong. A coil of rope that had been on the left now sat on the right. The lantern we'd left unlit was burning, though the flame was a strange blue-green color. "Someone's been here," Jacob whispered. "Or something." I doused the lantern. The normal yellow flame died instantly, as if relieved to stop pretending. "Grab what we need and let's go. Quickly." We gathered rope, lanterns, and a pickaxe that might prove useful. As we turned to leave, I noticed something carved into the boat's hull. Fresh marks, still weeping sap where the wood had been cut. The same protective symbols from the cabin and cliffs, but arranged differently. Like a warning instead of a ward. Jacob traced the marks with his finger. "This is old script, pre-colonial. Uncle Silas's journals mentioned it. A language that predates any known settlement in this region." He looked at me with growing excitement. "Someone else was here. Before the English. Before the French. Maybe centuries before? Or someone carved these marks last night to frighten us away. From what? An empty island. But the island wasn't empty. We both knew that now. Something lived here, watched here, waited here. When we returned to the cabin, Nathaniel had made a discovery of his own. He'd found a loose stone in the fireplace, and behind it a leather satchel. Inside were more papers, but these were different, older. The ink had faded to brown, the paper brittle with age. "Letters," Nathaniel said, spreading them carefully on the table. "Addressed to someone named Morrow. Captain Elias Morrow. Dated 1879. I recognized the name from my research into Uncle Silas's life. Morrow was his partner. An archaeologist and treasure hunter. They had a falling out. More than that." Nathaniel pointed to one letter. "Listen, dear Elias, I cannot in good conscience continue our partnership. What we have found beneath Grave Harbor is not ours to claim. It belongs to those who placed it here, and they placed it here for a reason. I'm sealing the entrance. Do not try to find it. Do not try to reach me. What we would unleash is worse than any curse. Your friend no longer, Silas." Jacob had gone very still. Morrow wanted the treasure. Uncle Silas refused to give it to him, so Morrow might have had reason to want Silas dead, I said slowly. The symbols carved into Silas's hands when they found his body. What if they weren't self-inflicted? What if someone was trying to make him talk? The implications settled over us like the fog. Uncle Silas hadn't died of madness or misadventure. He'd been murdered, and his killer might still be looking for what he died protecting. A sound from outside made us all freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, crunching across the rocky ground. Approaching the cabin with purpose, Nathaniel moved to the window. His face went pale. There's a boat anchored in the inlet. A big one, steam-powered, and at least 6 men heading this way. Morrow? Jacob breathed. Or someone who knows what we're looking for. I grabbed Uncle Silas's journals, shoving them into my bag. We need to hide, now. But there was nowhere to go. The cabin had one room, one door, windows too small to climb through. And in seconds the footsteps had reached the porch. The door shook under a heavy fist. Coulter's! The voice was cultured, educated, and utterly cold. I know you're in there. I've been watching, waiting. Your uncle and I had unfinished business. Now that business passes to you. Nathaniel grabbed the pickaxe. Jacob positioned himself near the fireplace. I stood frozen, Uncle Silas's journals clutched to my chest as the door swung open to reveal our future. The man who entered the cabin was not what I expected. Refined features, expensive clothing marred by travel but still elegant. Silver hair swept back from a high forehead. Eyes that might have been kind in another life, in another story. But in this moment, they held only calculation. Captain Morrow, I said. It wasn't a question. He smiled, revealing perfect teeth. Miss Coulter, I'd recognize you anywhere. You have your uncle's eyes. That same damnable curiosity, he gestured, and 2 of his men entered, both armed with rifles. Please, don't make this difficult. I've come too far, waited too long. Silas is dead, Nathaniel said. The pickaxe hung loose in his hands, useless against firearms. Whatever he promised you, whatever you think you're owed, died with him, promised. Morrow laughed, a sound like breaking glass. He promised me nothing but lies. We were partners once. We found something magnificent beneath this island, evidence of a civilization that would rewrite history. But Silas grew afraid, started believing in curses and covenants, started thinking we needed to protect the world from knowledge. His expression hardened. I don't believe in protection. I believe in progress. Jacob moved slightly toward the trapdoor. Morrow noticed immediately. Ah, yes. The entrance. Still sealed, I assume? Silas was thorough. He collapsed the main tunnel, destroyed his maps, refused to speak even when... He paused, and something like regret crossed his face. Even when I made it very unpleasant for him to stay silent, you killed him. The words escaped before I could stop them. I removed an obstacle, but he took his secrets to the grave. Or so I thought. Morrow's eyes fixed on my bag, on the journals barely concealed there. Until I learned about the will. About 3 heirs who would inherit not just land, but knowledge. Tell me, Miss Coulter, have you read your uncle's final journals? Has he told you where to find the heart? The heart, that phrase again. The thing Uncle Silas had spent years protecting. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Liar. Morrow moved closer, but a brave one. Your uncle was brave too, in the end. Even with the symbols carved into his hands, even weighted with stones and thrown into the sea, he kept his silence. He pulled something from his coat, a pendant, gold and ancient, covered in the same script we'd seen everywhere. This was his. I took it from his body before the fisherman. Found him. It's a key, Miss Coulter, but I don't know what lock it fits. You're going to help me find out. Thunder cracked across the sky. The cabin shuddered, and from beneath our feet came a sound that raised every hair on my body. A deep grinding, like stone moving against stone. The trapdoor began to shake. What's happening? One of Morrow's men backed toward the door, his rifle trembling. The island knows, Jacob said softly. His eyes were distant, unfocused. It knows we brought violence here, greed. The curse awakens when the intent is wrong. There is no curse. Morrow shouted. But his voice held doubt now, fear. The grinding grew louder. The floorboards cracked, and suddenly the trapdoor burst open, not up but down, as if the space beneath had expanded impossibly. The ladder extended into darkness that seemed to have no bottom, and from that darkness came wind, cold and mineral and ancient beyond reckoning. The tunnels, I breathed. They're opening. One of Morrow's men broke, running for the door. He made it 3 steps before the floor collapsed beneath him. He fell screaming into the widening hole, his cries cutting off with terrible suddenness. "We need to leave." Nathaniel grabbed my arm. "The whole structure is collapsing." But Morrow had drawn a pistol, pointing it directly at my chest. "The journals, Miss Coulter, now, or I start shooting." The cabin tilted. Walls groaned. Through the windows, I could see the ground outside splitting, revealing openings that breathed fog and darkness. The island was coming apart. Or perhaps it was coming together, revealing what had always been hidden beneath. Jacob moved before I could stop him. He lunged at Morrow, tackling him to the tilting floor. The pistol fired, deafening in the enclosed space. Nathaniel shouted. I couldn't tell who'd been hit. Then the floor gave way entirely, and we were falling. We fell for less than a second, but it felt like drowning in darkness. I hit stone, rolled, gasped for breath that tasted of copper and salt. Somewhere nearby, someone groaned. A lantern flickered to life, casting wild shadows across walls that glistened with moisture and something else. Veins of gold, thin as spider silk, running through the rock in patterns too regular to be natural. I took inventory. Bruised, battered, but nothing broken. Jacob lay nearby, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. Nathaniel was already on his feet, the pickaxe somehow still in his grip, and Morrow. He stood between us and the collapsed entrance above, his remaining men pulling themselves upright. The pistol was gone, lost in the fall, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. "Finally," he breathed. "After all these years, I'm inside." We were in a tunnel, not the rough-hewn passage of miners, but something older. The walls were carved with deliberate precision, covered in the script we'd seen above. The gold veins pulsed faintly, providing light that shouldn't exist. "How is that possible?" I whispered. "Bioluminescence," Morrow said, running his hand along the wall almost reverently. "Or something like it. Silas theorized the gold itself was alive, part of whatever created this place." He turned to face us. "This is just the beginning, the entrance. The real chamber lies deeper." The heart, Jacob tried to stand, winced, fell back. "You'll never find it." "Uncle Silas sealed it. With your help, I won't need to find it." Morrow nodded to his men. "Bring them, all of them. They'll serve as motivation for each other." We were herded deeper into the tunnel. The passage sloped downward at a gentle angle, but every step felt like descending into something's throat. The symbols on the walls began to change. Where before they'd been warnings and wards, now they told a story. I couldn't read the language, but the images were clear enough. People gathering, something being buried, guardians being set, a covenant being sworn. "They hid something here," I said. "Something they thought was too dangerous for the world above, or too precious," Morrow's voice echoed strangely. "Knowledge, Miss Coulter. Pure knowledge. Everything humanity forgot when the old civilizations fell. Mathematics, astronomy, engineering beyond our current understanding. It's all here waiting. And the curse? Insurance. Fear to keep away the greedy and unworthy." He smiled. "But I am neither." The tunnel opened into a cavern that stole my breath. It stretched vast and cathedral-like, the ceiling lost in darkness above. The gold veins here were thick as my arm, forming patterns across the stone that might have been writing or art or mathematical formulae. And throughout the chamber, arranged in careful rows, were the dead, skeletons still clutching mining tools. Some seated as if resting, others sprawled as if they'd fallen running, all of them positioned to face the center of the cavern, where a stone door stood sealed by symbols that blazed with golden light. "The heart," Morrow whispered. "The last door." Nathaniel stepped forward, his voice shaking. "These men, they all died here. They died guarding," Jacob corrected. He'd pulled himself upright, one hand still pressed to his bleeding shoulder. "Look at their positions. They're not victims. They're sentinels. They chose to stay." "Madness," one of Morrow's men muttered. "This is all madness," but I understood. Uncle Silas had understood. These weren't miners killed by cave-ins or toxic gas. These were the last guardians, faithful to their duty even unto death. And they were still watching. I could feel their hollow eyes tracking our movements, judging our intent. "Open it!" Morrow commanded, gesturing to the stone door. "I don't know how," I said truthfully. "Then figure it out. You have your uncle's journals. You have his blood. You have the right," he raised his voice. "Or do you want to join the Guardians here in Eternal Watch?" Lightning flashed somewhere above, visible through cracks in the cavern ceiling. Thunder followed, impossibly loud. And in that flash I saw something that made my heart stop. Fresh footprints in the dust, leading to the stone door. Leading away, made within hours, not decades. Someone had been down here recently. Someone had opened the door and sealed it again. Uncle Silas. His body had been found weighted with stones, but what if he'd survived long enough to return here? To hide something? To change something? I moved toward the door, aware of Morrow's men tracking me with their weapons. The symbols blazed brighter as I approached, and I felt heat radiating from the stone. Not physical heat, but something else. A warning. A test. I pulled out Uncle Silas's final journal, flipping through pages until I found what I needed. Not instructions, not a key, but a question, written in his shakiest hand. What would you sacrifice to keep the darkness sealed? And I understood. The door wasn't locked with keys or combinations. It was locked with intent, with will. You could only open it if you truly believed you were worthy. If you were willing to pay the price, Morrow couldn't open it. His greed blinded him. But could I? I placed my hand on the door, and the cavern exploded with light. The light wasn't golden anymore. It was white, pure and burning, and it came from everywhere at once. The symbols on the door flared to life beneath my palm, sending threads of brilliance racing across the stone like lightning captured in rock. I couldn't pull my hand away. Couldn't move. Could barely breathe. Images flooded my mind. Not memories, knowledge, understanding. I saw the island as it had been 3,000 years ago. Not isolated, but part of a chain. A civilization that stretched along the coast, building in harmony with the land. They'd discovered something beneath these rocks. Something that predated even their ancient culture. A chamber, a library, a repository of knowledge from something older still. They'd understood what they'd found, understood its power, and they'd made a choice. To guard it, to seal it, to ensure that humanity would only gain access when it was truly ready. Not greedy, not desperate, but wise. The Guardians had sworn an oath. Generations of them living and dying on this island, keeping watch. Until the old ways were forgotten, until legend became myth, until the island was abandoned to fog and fear. But the oath remained, written into the stone itself, waiting for someone to remember. Uncle Silas had remembered. He'd learned the truth and taken up the watch. For 10 years, alone, he'd kept the covenant. Until Morrow found him. Until torture broke his body, though never his will. In his final moments, drowning in the cold Atlantic, Uncle Silas had carved the symbols into his own hands. Not from madness, from devotion. Renewing the oath with his dying breath, ensuring the heart stayed sealed. And now the choice passed to me. The door was asking, what would I sacrifice? What was I willing to give up to keep this knowledge safe? My curiosity? My dreams of discovery? My very life? Abby? Nathaniel's voice cut through the vision. Your hand. I looked down. My palm against the stone was glowing, the symbols transferring themselves onto my skin in lines of golden fire. It didn't hurt, not exactly, but I could feel them sinking deeper, becoming permanent, becoming part of me. The door was opening. No, I whispered. I don't want this open. I want it sealed. What are you doing? Morrow shoved me aside, placing his own hands on the door. Open, damn you, open! But the light died at his touch. The symbols went dark. The door remained shut. You can't, I said, understanding flooding through me. Your intent is wrong. The island knows. Morrow's face twisted with rage. Then you open it. I can't. I already made my choice. I chose to keep it sealed. Liar. I saw the door moving. You saw the covenant transferring. I'm the new guardian, me, not you. Never you. He backhanded me, sending me sprawling across the stone floor. Blood filled my mouth. Nathaniel roared and swung the pickaxe, but Morrow's men intercepted him. Jacob tried to rise and collapsed, his shoulder wound bleeding more freely now. I have come too far, Morrow said, his voice deadly calm. Sacrifice too much. I will have what's behind that door. If you won't open it, I'll blast it open. I'll dig through solid rock if I must. But I will have it. He pulled something from his coat. Dynamite. 3 sticks bound together, fuse ready. You'll collapse the entire cavern, I said. Kill us all. Then we'll die knowing what's inside. He struck a match. The cavern trembled. Not from the dynamite, from something deeper. The gold veins in the walls pulsed with sudden, violent light. The dead guardians seemed to shift position, their hollow eyes blazing with the same golden fire. And from behind the sealed door came a sound, humming, the same tune I'd heard in my dreams. The same melody Uncle Silas used to sing. What is that? One of Morrow's men backed away, his weapon forgotten. What's behind there? The truth, Jacob said. He'd pulled himself to his knees, his face pale but his eyes clear. The truth about what we are, what we were, what we could become. And humanity isn't ready. We're still children playing with fire, still killing each other over gold and land and power. That's why it's sealed. Not to keep us out, to protect us from ourselves. Morrow's hand trembled. The match burned toward his fingers. You don't know that. I do. Because Uncle Silas knew. Because every guardian who came before knew. The knowledge behind that door could save us or destroy us. And right now, in our greed and fear and violence, which do you think is more likely? The match burned out. Morrow stared at the dynamite in his hands, then at the door, then at me with my palms still glowing with transferred symbols. I've wasted my life, he whispered. 20 years chasing this. Killing for it. And you're telling me it has to stay sealed? Until we're ready, I said gently. Until we grow wise enough to use knowledge without weaponizing it. That could be next year, or next century, but not today. Not like this. For a moment I thought he might agree, might see reason, might understand. Then the cavern floor cracked, not from the tremors, from gunfire. One of Morrow's men had fired at the door in panic or frustration or madness. The bullet struck the stone, ricocheted and hit a support column. The ancient structure, stable for millennia, groaned. The ceiling began to fall. Run! Nathaniel grabbed me, pulling me toward the tunnel entrance. Jacob stumbled after us. Morrow's men scattered, abandoning their captain. And Morrow himself stood frozen before the door, even as boulders rained down around him. It should have been mine, he said quietly. I earned it. Then the ceiling collapsed, and Captain Elias Morrow was buried beneath 3,000 years of stone and covenant and guardian bones. We ran through tunnels filling with dust and darkness. Behind us, the cavern was sealing itself. The island was closing its wounds, hiding its secrets once more. My hand burned where the symbols had been written. Lighting our way through the collapse, we emerged into grey daylight just as the cabin imploded, falling into the expanding sinkhole that had once been Grave Harbor's hidden heart. The ground shook, the cliffs groaned, and slowly, impossibly, the island began to sink. It's destroying itself, Jacob gasped. Erasing the evidence, protecting the truth, I corrected. One last time, we made it to our boat as the inlet walls collapsed. Nathaniel rowed with desperate strength while Jacob pressed cloth against his bleeding shoulder. I looked back once at Grave Harbor Isle as it surrendered to the waves. The fog rolled in thick and final, and when it cleared, the island was gone. Not sunken, simply gone as if it had never existed. Just empty water and a few scattered rocks that would appear on no chart. My palm still glowed faintly. The symbols were permanent now. The covenant had passed to me. I was the last guardian of something that no longer had a home. And somewhere beneath the Atlantic, the heart beat on, sealed and safe, waiting for a wiser age. The mainland came into view through dissipating fog, solid and real in a way that made the past 3 days feel like fever dreams. But Jacob's wound was real enough, still bleeding through layers of cloth. Nathaniel's hands were blistered raw from rowing, and my palm burned with symbols that pulsed faintly with each beat of my heart. We didn't speak during the journey back. What words could capture what we'd witnessed? The island swallowing itself, Morrow buried beneath centuries of stone. The knowledge we'd glimpsed and chosen to leave sealed, Silence seemed the only honest response. The harbour master saw us approaching and crossed himself again, more fervently this time. "Thought you were dead," he called out as we drew near the dock. "Storm last night was unnatural. Fog so thick we couldn't see our own boats. And this morning, folks swear they saw lightning coming up from the water instead of down from the sky. We ran into trouble," Nathaniel said, helping me onto the dock. His voice was steady, practiced, the naval officer hiding trauma behind protocol. "We'll need a doctor for my brother. And what happened to your friends?" The harbour master peered past us at our empty boat. "Saw you leave with just the three of you, but there was another vessel that followed. Big steamer, never came back. Lost in the storm," I said. It wasn't entirely a lie. The island is dangerous. The rocks, the currents. You were right to warn us. Something in my tone made him study my face more carefully. Then his gaze dropped to my hand, still wrapped in cloth to hide the glowing symbols. His weather-beaten face went pale. "You went down into it, didn't you? Into the deep places." It wasn't a question. My grandfather told stories. Said the old families knew. Said there were watchers who kept the covenant. He stepped back, almost reverent. "I thought it was just tales." "It is just tales," Nathaniel said firmly. "Old superstitions. The island's geology is unstable, that's all. Now, if you'll excuse us, my brother needs medical attention." The harbour master nodded slowly, but his eyes never left my wrapped hand. "As you say, sir, as you say. But if you're staying in town tonight, you might want to avoid the tavern. Folks talk, and they've been talking, about strange lights and voices coming from the direction of Grave Harbour for 3 nights running. We found lodging at a boarding house run by a widow who asked no questions beyond whether we wanted breakfast." Jacob collapsed onto a bed while Nathaniel went to fetch the doctor. I sat by the window, unwrapping the cloth from my hand with trembling fingers. The symbols were still there, glowing faintly in the dim room. They formed a pattern I was beginning to understand. Not words exactly, but concepts. Duty, protection, sacrifice, knowledge, and beneath them all, a single imperative. Guard. "Does it hurt?" Jacob's voice was weak but alert. He'd propped himself against the headboard, face pale from blood loss, but eyes sharp. "No, it feels like it's always been there. Like I was born with it and only just noticed." I flexed my fingers, watching the light pulse. "I can feel it, Jacob, the covenant. It's not just symbols on skin. It's in my blood now, in my bones. I know where the heart is. I'll always know. Even though the island is gone, I can feel it beneath the water, still beating, still sealed. And if someone comes looking, someone like Morrow, then I'll do what Uncle Silas did. Protect it. Mislead them. Die before I reveal its location if I must." The certainty in my voice surprised me. "This isn't a choice anymore. It's who I am now." Jacob closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Abby. We should never have involved you in this." Uncle Silas involved me. He chose me. He knew I'd understand. That I'd value truth over treasure, preservation over possession. I moved to his bedside. "Let me see your shoulder." The wound was worse than I'd thought. The bullet had passed through cleanly, but infection was setting in. The edges were red and swollen, radiating heat. Jacob would need serious medical care, possibly surgery. "You took that bullet meant for me," I said quietly. "When Morrow fired in the cabin, you pushed me aside. Family protects family, even when family inherits cursed islands and ancient covenants." He managed a weak smile. "Besides, you're the guardian now. Can't have you getting shot before you've learned the job." The doctor arrived an hour later, a gruff man who smelled of whiskey and carbolic. He examined Jacob's shoulder with experienced hands, probing the wound, while my cousin bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. "Bullet's gone through clean. But you've got sepsis starting," the doctor announced. "Needs aggressive treatment. I can do it here, but it'll be rough. Or you can take the train to Boston, get proper hospital care." "Your choice." "Here," Jacob gasped. "Can't travel." "Too weak." The doctor nodded and began unpacking instruments that looked medieval in their brutality. "You two might want to step outside. This isn't going to be pleasant." Nathaniel and I stood in the hallway while Jacob's muffled screams echoed through the door. My brother paced like a caged animal, all restless energy and suppressed emotion. Finally, he stopped and turned to face me. "Tell me the truth, Abby. What really happened down there, in that cavern? When you touched the door?" I'd been dreading this conversation. Nathaniel had built his life on rationality, on provable facts and naval regulations. How could I explain visions and covenants and knowledge that burned itself into your soul? "I saw things," I began carefully. "Understood things. The island wasn't cursed, Nathaniel. It was sacred. A guardian place, hiding knowledge that humanity isn't ready for. That's what Jacob said. But what does it mean? What knowledge? What's so dangerous it needs to be buried forever?" "Not forever. Just until we're ready. Until we grow wise enough to use it without destroying ourselves." I held up my glowing hand. "This is the proof. The covenant transfers from guardian to guardian. Uncle Silas had it. Now I have it. And someday, when I'm old and dying, I'll pass it to whoever comes next." Nathaniel stared at my hand, his face a battleground of skepticism and belief. "There has to be a rational explanation. Phosphorescence, some chemical reaction from touching ancient minerals. Does there? Does everything have to fit into what we already understand? Can't there be mysteries that remain mysteries? Truths that transcend science?" "No," the word came out harsh. "Because once you accept that, once you allow for the supernatural, the inexplicable, then anything becomes possible. Logic fails. Reason fails. We're left with superstition and fear, or faith," I said softly, "or trust, or the humility to admit that we don't know everything, that perhaps we're not meant to know everything." Not yet. Jacob's screaming had stopped. The silence was almost worse. Nathaniel turned away from me, hands clenched into fists. Eleanor was right. I should never have come. Should have let the lawyers handle the inheritance, sold the island sight unseen, moved on with my life. His voice cracked. "Now Jacob's dying, you've been marked by God knows what, and I can't explain any of it in terms that make sense." "What research?" "That's for you to determine. Each guardian interprets the covenant differently. Some focused on misdirection, spreading false legends about the island to discourage treasure hunters. Others studied history, trying to understand when humanity might be ready for the knowledge. Silas believed that we needed moral evolution, not just technological advancement. That we had to learn to value wisdom over power. I thought of Captain Morrow, brilliant and driven, and ultimately destroyed by his own greed. I thought of the miners who died guarding the heart, faithful to the end. I thought of my own choice in that cavern, to keep the door sealed despite my burning curiosity about what lay beyond. "I'll continue his work," I said, "but in my own way. I'll document history, real history, not legends. I'll search for evidence of the ancient civilizations that created the heart, and I'll prepare humanity for the day when we're finally worthy of what's waiting beneath the waves. That could take centuries. Then future guardians will continue what I start. That's how covenants work. One generation plants the seeds, another tends the garden, and someday someone will harvest what we've all protected." I stood, tucking the journal into my bag. "Thank you, Mr. Pemberton, for everything. For being Uncle Silas's friend. For keeping his secrets. Will you tell your cousins? About the money? About the journal? They already know everything that matters. The rest is just details." I moved toward the door, then paused. "One question. Were you ever a guardian? Or a keeper of some kind?" He smiled sadly. "No, just a lawyer who made friends with an unusual man. But I've helped where I could. Kept records. Protected documents. Misled the curious. There are many ways to serve the covenant without carrying its mark." I left his office feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I finally understood my path forward. Heavier because I knew that path would be long and lonely and dangerous. But also meaningful. Profoundly, eternally meaningful. Jacob and Nathaniel were waiting at the train station. Jacob still favored his wounded shoulder, but his color had returned, and his eyes were bright with life. Nathaniel looked tired, but resolute. Whatever internal battle he'd been fighting apparently settled, ready to go home. Nathaniel asked. "I don't know where home is anymore," I admitted. "Everything's changed. I've changed. You're still our cousin, still family. That hasn't changed. Jacob gripped my arm gently. Whatever you need to do, wherever this covenant takes you, we'll support you. Won't we, Nathaniel? Our older cousin nodded slowly. I don't understand what happened. I may never understand. But I saw your courage down there in the darkness. I saw you choose protection over discovery. That's enough for me. You're the guardian now. We'll guard the guardian. Tears stung my eyes. I'd expected them to distance themselves, to flee from the strangeness I now embodied. Instead, they were offering solidarity. Family, as Jacob said. Not just blood, but choice. Thank you, I whispered. Both of you, for believing me. For trusting me. For surviving with you, Nathaniel corrected. We're in this together, always. The train whistle blew. We boarded together, finding seats in a quiet car. As the locomotive pulled away from Ashford, I looked out the window one last time at the Atlantic, grey and restless in the distance. Somewhere beneath those waves, the heart still beat, still waited, still held knowledge that could save or damn humanity, and I was its keeper now. For better or worse, for the rest of my life and beyond, the courtroom in Boston was oak-panelled and severe, filled with officials who viewed us with skepticism, barely masked by professional courtesy. We sat in hard chairs while a magistrate shuffled papers and maritime authorities conferred in whispers. Captain Morrow's disappearance had raised questions. His crew also missing. His expensive steamer never returned to port. Let me understand your testimony, Miss Coulter. The magistrate, a stern man with wire spectacles and greying mutton chops, peered at me over his notes. You claim that Captain Morrow and 6 of his men were lost in a storm near your inherited property. Yet no wreckage has been found, no bodies, no evidence of this vessel at all. The storm was severe, I said calmly, the lie coming easier than I'd expected. The waters around those rocks are treacherous. We barely escaped ourselves. My cousin was seriously wounded. I gestured to Jacob, whose arm was still in a sling, and yet fishermen report no unusual storm activity in that region during the dates you specify. No other vessels reported damage or distress. Perhaps they were further out to sea. I met his gaze steadily. Or perhaps the storm was localized. Microclimates can create unusual weather patterns in coastal waters. Nathaniel shifted beside me, and I knew he was struggling with the lies. But they were necessary. The truth would raise far more questions than it answered. Questions that could lead others to search for an island that no longer existed, seeking knowledge that must remain sealed. The magistrate consulted with his colleagues again, their whispers creating a susurrus of doubt and suspicion. Finally, he turned back to us. We have reviewed Captain Morrow's history. He was known to engage in questionable ventures, treasure hunting, archaeological theft. There are outstanding warrants from several countries regarding stolen artifacts. He removed his spectacles to clean them, a gesture that felt significant. Given his reputation and the lack of evidence to contradict your account, we are prepared to rule this an accident at sea. Case closed. Relief flooded through me, though I kept my expression neutral. Beside me, Jacob exhaled slowly. Nathaniel's shoulders finally relaxed. However, the magistrate continued, and my heart sank. There is the matter of your inherited property. Grave Harbor Isle. We've attempted to locate it for survey purposes, to establish proper ownership and taxation. Our navigators report that no such island exists in the coordinates specified in your uncle's deed. It was always more rock than island, I said carefully. Barely above high tide. The storm we experienced may have caused further erosion. Perhaps it's finally succumbed to the sea, perhaps. He didn't sound convinced. Or perhaps it never existed as described. Silas Coulter was known to be eccentric in his later years. It's possible he imagined much of what he documented. I let the insult to Uncle Silas pass. Better they think him mad than continue searching for what he'd protected. Regardless, without a verifiable property, we cannot maintain the deed as active. The inheritance is hereby dissolved. You retain any personal effects and monetary assets, but the land itself is struck from official records. The magistrate signed a document with a flourish. Consider the matter settled. We left the courthouse into autumn sunlight. Boston bustled around us, carriages and pedestrians and the urgent business of civilization. It all felt distant somehow, irrelevant. We'd touched something ancient and profound, and now we were expected to simply resume normal life. "That went better than expected," Jacob said quietly. "They wanted it closed," Nathaniel replied. "Morrow had enemies, people who are probably relieved he's gone. And the island," he trailed off, still struggling with its impossibility, "is safe," I finished. "That's all that matters." We separated at the train station. Nathaniel was returning to his family, to Eleanor and his children and the naval consulting work he'd taken up after leaving active service. Jacob planned to travel west, perhaps to California, seeking new archaeological sites and fresh beginnings. "What will you do, Abby?" Jacob asked as we waited on the platform. "Where will you go?" I touched my palm where the symbols lay hidden. I'd learned to mask them, to make them invisible to casual observation. But I felt them always, pulsing with the covenant's weight and promise. "Everywhere," I said. "Anywhere knowledge needs protecting or truth needs preserving." Uncle Silas's journal mentioned other sites, other hidden places. Perhaps the heart isn't the only repository. Perhaps there are other guardians out there protecting other secrets. You're going to search for them. I'm going to find them, connect them, build a network of protection for when the world finally awakens. I smiled at his expression. "Not today, not even in our lifetimes perhaps, but someday humanity will be ready for what's waiting. And when that day comes, the guardians need to be prepared to reveal everything safely, wisely." Jacob embraced me carefully, mindful of his healing shoulder. "Write to me. Let me know you're safe. I will. And Jacob, thank you for taking that bullet, for believing, for being family when I needed it most. Always." He stepped back, eyes bright with emotion. "The curse was never in the island, was it? It was in us. In our greed and fear and inability to see beyond our own desires, yes, but also in our courage to choose differently, to value wisdom over wealth. That's not a curse. That's hope." Nathaniel joined us for a final farewell. He gripped my hand formally, but I saw past his military bearing to the uncertainty beneath. "I still don't understand what happened," he admitted. "I've tried to rationalize it, to find logical explanations. And I can't. It breaks everything I thought I knew about the world." "Then perhaps it's time to know the world differently," I suggested gently. "Not everything fits into neat categories, Nathaniel. Some truths are too large for logic alone. They require faith. I'm not a faithful man. You have faith in family, in duty, in doing what's right even when it's hard." "That's enough." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you for protecting us down there, for being strong when Jacob and I needed strength. That's what family does." He released my hand, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief, awkward embrace. "Be careful, Abby. Whatever path you're walking now, be careful." "I will. I promise." The train whistle blew for Boston, for home, for the lives they'd returned to. But my train wouldn't arrive for another hour. I had time to walk, to think, to begin planning the journey ahead. I made my way to the harbor, to the docks where ships departed for every corner of the world. The Atlantic stretched before me, grey and eternal. Beneath those waters, 12 miles from a town called Ashford, the heart still beat, still waited, still held secrets that could transform everything. But not yet. Not today. Not until humanity evolved beyond its current state of greed and violence and fear. Until we learned to cherish knowledge without weaponizing it. Until we grew wise enough to deserve what the ancients had preserved for us. I pulled out a fresh journal, its pages blank and waiting. On the first page I wrote, "My name is Abigail Coulter. I'm the 47th guardian of the Covenant. This is my testimony. The island called Grave Harbor is gone, but what it protected remains. Beneath the waves, sealed by ancient magic or science so advanced it appears as magic, lies knowledge that could save or damn our species. My duty is to ensure it remains sealed until we are worthy of opening that final door. This may take generations, centuries, perhaps longer. But every great work begins with a single guardian, a single choice, a single moment of courage when faced with impossible truth. I choose to guard. I choose to protect. I choose to hope that someday in a wiser age, my successors will be able to choose differently. Until then, I watch. I wait. I remember what others have forgotten. The curse was never in the island. It was in us. And so is the cure. I closed the journal and looked out at the horizon where sea met sky. Somewhere out there were other secrets, other guardians, other covenants waiting to be discovered and honored. My work had just begun. A seagull cried overhead, and for a moment I could have sworn I heard Uncle Silas's voice carried on the wind. Not words exactly, but understanding, approval, blessing. I won't fail you, I whispered to the sea, to the memory, to the covenant burning invisible on my palm. The watch continues. Today and always. The sun broke through the clouds, painting the water gold. And I smiled, knowing that somewhere beneath those gilded waves, the heart beat on. Patient, eternal, waiting for a world wise enough to claim its inheritance. The true treasure was never gold. It was the choice to protect rather than possess, to preserve rather than plunder, to guard a gift for future generations, even if we would never see them open it. That was the legacy of the Coulters. Not cursed, not lucky, simply faithful to something greater than ourselves. And I would carry that legacy forward, one day at a time, one choice at a time, until the end of my watch or the dawn of a wiser age, whichever came first. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot